particularly there's been great work that's been achieved by Auckland Council, not only in the last 6 years but previous to that. It's a great city. It's going forward. Our role as ATED, as we said, is to actually leverage that, leverage all the good work that's been done to make this a great city, and make a difference between having an average talent pool and having a great talent pool. That's the guts of it. And so when you come to this strategy, that really is what sets this in place to try to make that difference in the longer term. The first bit is the visitor economy. And many of you again have heard me say this, that when you do big developments, big master plan developments, which I've been fortunate to be involved with, one of the hardest things is how do you attract the best businesses into these developments? You actually got to create the right amenities. So many of these developments, you have a township in the middle of them with amenity. The thing is that you know that the population of that development will not support the amenity of that town centre. So the key thing is you've got to attract visitors to come into that town centre, to spend lots of money to make that town centre quite a neat little town centre, so you then can actually develop the rest of your development and attract the right developers. I use that example simply, that is the same as a city. You have to get your amenity level up to attract and retain the best talent. And the biggest leverage to do that is your visitor economy. The two examples I give is Manhattan Island, 2 million visitors on 2 million residents on Manhattan Island, and you've got basically 1 million visitors that stay every night in Manhattan Island. Work out who underwrites the amenity of Manhattan Island. At the other end of the scale, those who have been fortunate enough to cycle the Otago Rail Trail now see those small little communities up the Matukatuk Valley and those areas now starting to really come alive because of the visitors that go through there and spend money on coffees and places and make those places a much better place to be. So the visitor economy is absolutely critical, and the thing that we face most here is seasonality in Auckland. So a lot of the focus on events, conventions and key attractors is trying to dampen the seasonality fluctuations that we have in Auckland, and we've done a good job at doing that. The second one is once you get that right, you really now have to say, how do you showcase your areas of innovation to really put yourself on the map globally to attract and retain talent in those areas. So hence the work around Grid Auckland, Screen, Food Bowl, specific industries that have been highlighted for our advanced industries framework that we've put together using frameworks out of the Brookings Institute in the US to say these are the key areas where we do have a competitive advantage globally, and how do we help those businesses to establish themselves and to also attract international businesses into those industries to basically leverage our innovation. And that then just transform. Once you get that right, you can then really leverage talent attraction and business attraction around that. The fourth bit actually is something that Greg Clark pointed out in his second to last visit here, is that actually no one knows about Auckland from a business standpoint. We are irrelevant. And we may think we're relevant, but internationally we're not. So it's how do you look at initiatives and actually increase the relevance of Auckland in the international environment from a business standpoint. We're up there from a visitor standpoint now, but we're not there from a business standpoint for businesses to see this as a place to set up regional offices. So that's the simplicity of in terms of the strategy that we are going forward. And in summary, we like to summarise it as, new smart money and new high-value jobs for Auckland. I'll pass over to Brett.
Thanks, David. And Brett, we're just keeping an eye on the time, about 10 minutes max.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be concise in my comments. Morena, councillors and members, I just will briefly just touch on some indicators just to frame up how we've been performing as an economy. So if we look at the indicators that are from the Economic Development Strategy, you will see that we have seen strong growth in GDP, and in exports, and modest growth in productivity over the 5-year period that we've used here. The figures for 2016 obviously aren't complete, and we've seen good employment growth. One of the figures that I think has been a standout for Auckland Council, and this has been a partnership which I'll refer to later between Auckland Council, ATEED, central government, is the impact that we've had on workers not in employment, education or training, and that rate has dropped from 21% in 2010 to 12.4% today. That's pleasing progress, but there's still about 60,000 people out there who are not in jobs, and we need to do something about making sure that we access that potential talent pool, because as I'll touch on later in the presentation, we are very short of workers, and that is a major constraint to our growth. If we look at the sector performance, David has touched on this, we are seeing good, strong growth in the high-value sectors like ICT and food and beverage and screen. Of course, every day we can see the impact of growth in construction and engineering, and tourism, which is our largest industry, continues to show very strong growth. So if I just thought I would briefly touch over the next slides on not so much about what we do, but how we do it, just to give members a flavour of some of the work that we do. So when we talk about attracting new money into the economy, that is to stimulate job growth and particularly wage growth. Because we know that historically Auckland has been a lower wage economy, certainly compared to benchmark cities that we look at globally. So we tend to break that attraction down into these different areas: investor migration, investment into high-profile projects, into managed funds, which are growing all the time and providing a source of capital for our firms, directly into companies led by the private sector. So we're often involved in introducing investors into banks or into investment banks that are working with the private sector. And then also in our statement of intent, we have a target for the amount of investment that ATEED can put a hand on our heart and say that we facilitated. And you'll see that in the 2015-16 financial year, we assisted 9 multinational companies to establish or expand in Auckland, and that secured $328 million of investment. And I'm pleased to say that we're well and truly on track to exceed our SOI target this year already. So how are some of the ways that we do that? Firstly, we're a member of the government's Investment Attraction Task Force, and that's the partners that are involved with that. I sit on that task force, and not only do I represent ATEED on that, but ATEED represents all of the economic development agencies in New Zealand on that task force. One of the projects that has had some profile out of that task force has been Project Palace. This is a five New Zealand cities aggregating our demand, looking at how we attract hotels to meet this enormous demand that we're now seeing. We've had an NZTE team travel to China, the USA and Australia to meet investors. We're targeting investment into Auckland of about $2 billion, and I'm pleased to say, as you will have seen from media coverage, that we've already secured some new hotels for Auckland, and we expect some further announcements in the coming weeks about new hotels, both in the CBD but also excitingly outside of the CBD, in some of our regional areas where people are looking at those investment opportunities. Screen attraction is another important area where we're looking to bring new money into the Auckland economy. There we partner with the New Zealand Film Commission, with the private sector, the Ministry of Culture and Heritage and MB. You'll know that a key factor behind that is the screen incentives, which were updated with central government as a direct result of our work working alongside other regions. In recent times, we've secured new productions from the USA and China. New Zealand is the only country in the world that has both a film and television co-production agreement with China, and that's manifested itself in both movies and television programs, and a number of councillors had the opportunity of coming out to this new private sector owned facility at Kumeu in the former Fletcher Wood Panels plant, where we currently have a joint venture movie, Meg, being produced by Warner Brothers and Gravity Pictures from China, generating 650 jobs in the local area. And to the point made by my chair earlier, those are high-paying jobs across the economy. When we were out there, that movie spent $900,000 plus on timber from the local timber merchant in Henderson. So people across a whole range of professions are earning higher than they would normally by working on that. We see the sector growing towards $1 billion, and it's also diversifying into new areas like augmented reality and virtual reality, where Auckland has some particular strengths. One of the initiatives that I think Council can be very proud of is the Tripartite Alliance, because there aren't that many things that a city can actually do to really engage internationally from a trade and investment point of view. And this has been a great example where we've leveraged historic relationships with Guangzhou and Los Angeles, historic sister cities of ours. Our council global partners team have worked with our team at ATED, and we've developed this tripartite agreement, and now we've got other cities actually interested in joining the tripartite. Whether we would do that will obviously be a discussion for us to have at this committee in the future. What it has done globally is it set a new standard for city-to-city engagement and collaboration to enhance trade, investment and economic connections. Many of you will have attended the event that we had in Auckland in 2016, and it really showed the opportunity that we can provide to introduce our entrepreneurs and innovators with their counterparts around the world. At that event, we had 700 business matches, which was one of our measures, and already we can report $40 million of investment that's directly occurred because of that event. And like all of these programs, over time we will see more. Two notable examples from that, two of our smartest young technology companies, BookTrack and 90 Seconds, have both received significant equity investment in their firms as a result of introductions that were made for BookTrack this year at the Tripartite, and for 90 Seconds last year at the Tripartite meeting in Los Angeles. As part of the Tripartite, we held Tech Week this year, and this is an opportunity to really demonstrate to the rest of the world the strength of our ecosystem. As David said earlier, the rest of the world really doesn't know much about Auckland. And what we find when we talk to people globally is they know of New Zealand from 100% pure, but they don't know that we have a technology sector. We're hosting a Chinese delegation here today who were convinced that even though Peter Jackson was a New Zealander, he was based in Hollywood, because it wasn't plausible that a small country like New Zealand could actually have a screen sector of its own. So during Tech Week this year, the first event, we had 55 events with over 10,000 people there. A direct result of that was the establishment of the AR/VR Garage, which is based in Newton and now has 15 companies of it. An interesting story which plays to one of the themes earlier in the committee meeting. At that Tech Week event, we hosted a US tech investor, Pat Hull, who has a long track record of success in this area. Pat Hull has made a decision to bring some technology companies, some startups to Auckland rather than the US, and the plan is for him to be based down at Grid AKL. Through Pat Hull, I was introduced to Sir Richard Branson a couple of months ago at a meeting. Branson is now coming down here in March next year to spend some time in Auckland. Some of you will recall he came down in 2011 during Rugby World Cup. But one of the reasons that Sir Richard Branson's coming here is he wants to look at our sustainability initiatives. So he has a very strong personal commitment to global sustainability, and in the discussion I had with him, he's very interested in how we're using technology and innovation and science to deal with some of these issues. In fact, in quite a nice quote, he described New Zealand as the Noah's Ark of the world. And so they are the sort of connections that flow through these initiatives that we've taken together. And I'm pleased to report that in 2017, Tech Week will now be a national event, with obviously Auckland hosting the largest number of the events. Grid Auckland we've already talked about. We're forecasting $450 million of GDP from that initiative. We're seeing really strong excitement from companies to be based down there. And as I've said, I think in the past to other committees, the other exciting thing for us is we're now seeing the private sector follow the example that was set by council and now establishing innovation precincts around the region. So we're going to see the ability for those high-value innovation-based jobs to be in places like Manukau and in Albany and in Orewa and in Pukekohe and elsewhere. In terms of talent, I've touched on the importance of addressing youth unemployment and really growing the talent pool. And it's fair to say that's from two sources, from domestically and internationally.